Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the stars through the main screen. Earth had just learned to travel faster than light 6 months ago, and now humanity was taking its first steps into the galaxy. Jake felt proud of how far they had come, but he did not know that death was coming from the darkness between stars. The warning came at 800 hours, when Lieutenant Susan Davis called out from her station. She had been monitoring long-range sensors when something appeared that should not have been there. The readings showed massive objects moving toward Earth at incredible speed. Jake walked over to look at her screen and felt his blood turn cold. There were hundreds of ships approaching their solar system, and they were bigger than anything humans had ever built. Captain Lisa Ward was in the communications center when the first alien message arrived. The voice that came through the speakers was cold and harsh like metal scraping against stone. The translator worked quickly to convert the alien words into English, and what it said made everyone in the room stop breathing. The aliens called themselves the HFY Dominion, and they had come to claim Earth and all its people as property of their empire. The message was simple and terrifying. Humans were now slaves. Earth belonged to the HFY. Any resistance would be met with complete destruction. The aliens gave Earth 1 hour to surrender, or they would begin bombing every major city on the planet. Jake looked at the countdown timer on his screen and knew that 1 hour would not be enough time to save his world. Dr. Ben Carter was working in the main computer center when the invasion began. He had been helping to design Earth's first deep space exploration ships, but now those plans seemed useless. The aliens had technology that was hundreds of years ahead of anything humans possessed. Their ships had energy shields that could stop any weapon Earth could fire at them. Their weapons could destroy entire cities with single shots. Ben knew that if humanity was going to survive this attack, they would need to save their knowledge. He started copying everything in Earth's databases onto hidden storage devices. Every piece of scientific research, every technological breakthrough, every bit of information that might help humans fight back someday. The aliens might take their planet, but they would not take their minds. Commander Ryan Brooks was leading a fighter squadron when the first alien ships entered Earth's atmosphere. He had been a pilot for 15 years and had never seen anything move as fast as the HFY fighters. They were shaped like dark triangles with edges that seemed to cut through the air itself. Ryan fired his missiles at the nearest alien ship, but they bounced off its shields like raindrops hitting a window. The alien fighter turned toward Ryan and fired a beam of purple energy. The blast missed his ship by inches, but the heat from it melted the paint off his wing. Ryan pulled his fighter into a steep dive and tried to escape, but the alien ship followed him easily. It was faster, stronger, and deadlier than anything humans had ever faced in battle. All around Earth, the same scene was playing out. Human fighters and warships threw everything they had at the alien fleet, but nothing worked. The HFY shields were too strong and their weapons were too powerful. In less than 4 hours, Earth's entire defense fleet was either destroyed or forced to retreat. The planet was defenseless. The aliens did not wait long to begin their occupation. Giant transport ships landed in every major city on Earth. The doors opened, and out came the HFY soldiers. They were tall reptilian creatures with scales that looked like black armor. Their eyes were yellow and cold, and they carried weapons that could turn a human into ash with one shot. Behind them came their allies, the Zephyrian Collective. These aliens looked like giant insects, with 4 arms and wings that buzzed as they moved. Lisa Ward was trying to coordinate the evacuation of government officials when the aliens landed in Washington. She watched through security cameras as HFY soldiers marched through the streets. They set up energy barriers around important buildings and began rounding up anyone who looked like they might be in charge. The aliens moved with the confidence of predators who knew their prey could not escape. The HFY commander was a massive creature called General Vextar. He stood 12 feet tall, and his scales were darker than the others. When he spoke, his voice boomed through speakers that the aliens had placed throughout the city. He told the humans that their old lives were over. They were now property of the Dominion and would work wherever they were needed. Anyone who refused to obey would be killed. Jake Morrison tried to organize a counterattack from the New Horizon, but it was hopeless. The alien ships surrounded Earth like a metal cage, and their weapons were pointed at every major population center. If the human fleet tried to fight, the aliens would destroy entire cities full of innocent people. Jake had to make the hardest choice of his life. He ordered all human ships to stand down and surrender. The occupation began immediately. HFY soldiers went from house to house, taking people from their families and loading them onto transport ships. They separated the strong from the weak, the young from the old. The strongest humans were sent to work in alien mines on distant planets. The smartest were forced to work in factories building weapons for the Dominion. Children were taken to special camps where they would be trained to serve their new masters. Ryan Brooks watched from his hidden base in the mountains as transport ships lifted off from Earth carrying thousands of human prisoners. He had managed to escape the initial attack and was now trying to organize other survivors. They had found weapons and supplies scattered across the battlefield, but everything seemed useless against alien technology. Their bullets could not penetrate HFY armor, and their explosives barely scratched alien vehicles. Ben Carter had successfully hidden copies of Earth's technology in secret locations around the planet before he was captured. The aliens found him in his laboratory and dragged him away to work in one of their research facilities. As they forced him onto a transport ship, Ben looked back at Earth one last time. His home planet was covered in alien structures, and the sky was full of HFY patrol ships. But Ben carried a secret hope with him. Somewhere hidden in the ruins were the keys to humanity's future. The HFY made one critical mistake during their invasion. They believed that humans were just another primitive species to be enslaved and forgotten. They had conquered dozens of worlds before Earth, and every time the pattern was the same. The local population would fight briefly, lose quickly, and then accept their fate as slaves. The aliens expected humans to do the same thing, but humans were different in ways the HFY could not understand. Where other species gave up hope, humans grew angry. Where other races accepted defeat, humans began planning revenge. The aliens saw broken people loading onto their ships, but they did not see the fire that burned in human hearts. They had not destroyed humanity's spirit. They had only made it stronger. Lisa Ward was among the last to be taken from Earth. As her transport ship lifted off from the ruined planet, she pressed her face against the small window and made a promise. The aliens thought they had won, but this was not the end of the story. This was only the beginning. Somewhere in the darkness of space, humanity would find a way to fight back. The Kethvar had awakened something they did not understand, and they would regret it for the rest of their lives. 3 years had passed since the Kethvar conquered Earth, and the galaxy looked very different now. Human slaves worked in mines scattered across dozens of star systems, digging precious metals from asteroids and dead planets. The aliens treated them like tools, giving them just enough food and water to keep working. But the Kethvar did not know that their slaves were learning everything they could about alien technology. Kate Williams had been an engineer before the invasion, and now she worked in a Kethvar weapons factory on a planet called Mordak Prime. Every day she assembled energy rifles and plasma cannons under the watchful eyes of alien guards. The work was hard and dangerous, but Kate paid attention to every detail. She memorized how the weapons were built, what materials they used, and how the energy cores functioned. The aliens thought humans were too stupid to understand their technology, but they were wrong. Kate had a perfect memory, and she remembered everything she saw. At night, when the guards thought the slaves were sleeping, she drew diagrams on scraps of metal using charcoal from the furnaces. She was creating a complete blueprint of Kethvar weapons technology. Dr. Alex Turner was working in a different kind of prison. The Zephyrians had forced him to help design shield generators for their warships. Alex was a physicist who specialized in energy fields, and the insects needed his knowledge to improve their defenses. They gave him access to their computers and research data, thinking that one human scientist could not cause any real damage. Alex was much smarter than his captors realized. While he worked on their shield projects, he was also studying how their technology functioned. He learned that Kethvar shields operated on a specific frequency range and that their energy fields had weak points that could be exploited. Every piece of information was carefully memorized and hidden in his mind. On Earth, General Sam Rodriguez was leading the resistance from hidden bases deep underground. The Kethvar had left a small occupation force on the planet, but most of their attention was focused on other worlds. This gave the human resistance time to organize and plan. Sam had been a military strategist before the invasion, and now he was using those skills to fight an enemy unlike any he had faced before. The resistance had grown slowly but steadily over the past 3 years. Survivors from the initial battle had joined together in small groups, sharing resources and information. They communicated using old radio equipment that the aliens could not detect and moved supplies through tunnel networks that connected their hidden bases. Every week brought new recruits who were ready to fight for their freedom. Tony Clark was one of those recruits. He had been a mechanic before the invasion and was now working as a slave in a Kethvar vehicle repair facility. Tony had always been good with machines, and he quickly learned how alien technology worked. The repair bay gave him access to damaged Kethvar equipment, and he studied every piece that came through his station. Tony discovered that HFY vehicles used a complex computer system to control their engines and weapons. The aliens had never bothered to change their security codes because they believed humans were too primitive to hack their networks. Tony proved them wrong by breaking into several vehicle computers and copying their programming. He smuggled this information out of the facility by hiding data chips inside fake meal containers. Linda Hayes was working in a different kind of facility on a planet called Zerion 4. The Zephyrians had built massive factories there to produce the electronics that powered their fleet. Linda supervised a work crew of human slaves who assembled computer components 12 hours a day. The aliens trusted her because she kept the other workers productive and never caused trouble. But Linda was secretly documenting everything she saw. She memorized the layout of the factory, the production schedules, and the security systems. She also identified which components were most critical to Zephyrian operations. If the Resistance ever attacked this facility, Linda's information would help them know exactly what to target for maximum damage. The most important discovery came from Dr. Maria Santos, who was working in a Zephyrian research station orbiting a gas giant. Maria was a xenobiologist who had been studying alien life forms before the invasion. Now the insects forced her to analyze biological samples from conquered worlds, looking for useful genetic material that could be weaponized. Maria's work gave her access to the Zephyrian Central Database, and what she found there changed everything. The aliens were not the advanced civilization they pretended to be. Their technology came from dozens of different species that they had conquered over the centuries. The HFY and Zephyrians were military powers, but they were terrible scientists. They built their empire by stealing the knowledge of others. This discovery was incredibly important because it meant that human technology could compete with alien systems. The HFY weapons were based on designs stolen from a species called the Veltar, who had been enslaved 200 years ago. The Zephyrian shields used principles developed by the Aquatic Confederation before they were destroyed 50 years earlier. If humans could understand these technologies, they could build weapons and defenses that were just as powerful. Captain Pete Johnson was already testing this theory from a hidden base in the asteroid belt. Pete had escaped from Earth during the invasion and spent 3 years gathering other survivors. His base was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid and was completely invisible to alien sensors. From there, he launched small raids against HFY supply convoys, stealing equipment and taking prisoners. Pete's team had captured several alien weapons and vehicles over the years. They took everything apart piece by piece, studying how it worked and trying to build copies using human materials. Their first attempts were failures, but they learned from every mistake. Slowly, they began to understand the principles behind alien technology and started building hybrid devices that combined human engineering with alien science. The breakthrough came when Pete's team successfully reverse-engineered a HFY energy rifle. They could not build an exact copy because they lacked some of the rare materials, but they created a weapon that was almost as powerful. More importantly, they learned how to build ammunition that could penetrate HFY armor. For the first time since the invasion, humans had a weapon that could kill their oppressors. Back on Earth, General Rodriguez received this news through secret communication channels. The information from Pete's base was combined with reports from slaves working in alien facilities across the galaxy. Slowly, a complete picture of Kethvar and Zephyrian technology began to emerge. The Resistance now understood their enemies, strengths and weaknesses. Rodriguez began planning for the day when humans would fight back. He organized the Resistance into cells that could operate independently if communication was lost. Each cell was given specific targets and objectives based on the intelligence gathered by slaves and prisoners. The plan was ambitious and dangerous, but it was humanity's only hope for freedom. Kate Williams had completed her analysis of Kethvar weapons technology and smuggled the information to Earth using a communication device built from stolen components. Her data showed exactly how alien energy weapons functioned and provided blueprints for building human versions. This information was shared with resistance cells across the galaxy, giving them the knowledge they needed to fight back. Alex Turner made an equally important contribution by discovering how to disrupt Zephyrian shield systems. His research showed that the shields could be overloaded by hitting them with energy pulses at specific frequencies. Human ships equipped with modified transmitters could bring down alien shields, making their vessels vulnerable to conventional weapons. The aliens remained completely unaware of what was happening under their noses. They saw broken humans working in their facilities and never suspected that those same slaves were systematically stealing their secrets. The Kethvar and Zephyrians had made the same mistake that had doomed so many conquerors throughout history. They had underestimated their enemies and grown complacent in their power. Maria Santos sent her final report to the Resistance before her research station was moved to a new location. Her data included complete technical specifications for Zephyrian computer systems and detailed information about their military command structure. This intelligence would prove invaluable when the time came to strike back at the aliens. As the third year of occupation came to an end, humanity was no longer the helpless victim it had been during the invasion. Thousands of humans across the galaxy now possessed detailed knowledge of alien technology. Hidden bases were building weapons and ships using stolen designs. Communication networks connected resistance cells from Earth to the outer rim of the galaxy. The Kethvar and Zephyrians believed they had crushed human civilization, but they had actually created something much more dangerous. They had given humanity 3 years to study, learn, and prepare. The slaves working in their factories were not broken people waiting to die. They were soldiers gathering intelligence for the war that was coming. General Rodriguez stood in his command center deep beneath the ruins of Denver and looked at the tactical displays showing resistance cells across the galaxy. The revolution began at exactly midnight, coordinated across 50 different worlds. General Sam Rodriguez had spent months planning this moment, and now everything depended on perfect timing. The signal went out through hidden communication networks that had taken 3 years to build. Across the galaxy, human slaves received the same message. The time for freedom had come. Commander Lisa Ward stood on the bridge of the Defiant, a warship built in secret using stolen alien technology. The Baaz ship looked different from anything humans had built before, with sleek curves and energy weapons that could punch through Kethvar armor. Lisa had been working on this project for 2 years, training crews and preparing for the moment when they would take the fight to their oppressors. The first target was the orbital station above Earth, where the HFY kept their command center. Lisa's ship approached the station using a cloaking device, reverse-engineered from captured Zephyrian technology. The aliens had no idea that humans had learned to make themselves invisible to their sensors. The Defiant moved through space like a ghost, carrying death toward the creatures who had enslaved humanity. On Earth, resistance fighters emerged from hidden bunkers and tunnels across every continent. They carried weapons that looked strange, compared to old human designs, but were deadly effective against alien technology. Kate Williams had done her job well, providing blueprints that allowed humans to build energy rifles, plasma grenades, and armor-piercing ammunition that could penetrate HFY scales. Ryan Brooks led the assault on the main alien base in what used to be New York City. The HFY had built their fortress on the ruins of Manhattan, never thinking that humans would be brave enough to attack such a heavily defended position. Ryan and his team moved through the subway tunnels that connected their hidden base to the target. They wore armor made from salvaged alien materials and carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. The first HFY guard died without making a sound. Ryan's energy rifle burned a hole through the creature's chest, and it collapsed in a heap of smoking scales. The other guards turned toward the sound, but they were too slow. Human fighters poured out of the tunnels like an angry flood, their weapons blazing with purple fire. The aliens had grown soft during 3 years of easy occupation, and they were not ready for this kind of fight. Admiral Jake Morrison was commanding the space battle from his rebuilt flagship, the New Horizon. The ship had been upgraded with technology, stolen from a dozen different alien species. Its hull was covered with armor that could absorb energy weapons, and its engines could push it faster than any HFY vessel. Jake watched his tactical display as human ships appeared across the solar system, attacking alien positions with coordinated precision. The HFY orbital station exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the night sky over Earth. Lisa Ward had successfully completed her mission, destroying the alien command center and killing General Vextar along with most of his staff. The explosion sent debris raining down into Earth's atmosphere, burning streaks of light that told everyone on the planet that the revolution had begun. Tony Clark was leading an attack on the HFY vehicle depot, where he had worked as a slave for 3 years. He knew every inch of the facility and exactly where the aliens kept their most important equipment. Tony's team moved through the building like shadows, planting explosives on fuel tanks and weapon storage areas. The aliens who had once guarded him were now running for their lives as human fighters hunted them through corridors they thought were secure. The uprising spread across Earth like wildfire. In London, resistance fighters stormed the Zephyrian research facility and freed hundreds of human prisoners. In Tokyo, guerrilla forces destroyed the alien communication center that coordinated activities across the Pacific region. In Cairo, rebels captured an entire HFY supply convoy and distributed the weapons to civilians who joined the fight. Linda Hayes was simultaneously leading a revolt on Zarian 4, where thousands of human slaves had been building electronics for the Zephyrian fleet. Linda had spent 3 years memorizing every detail of the factory complex, and now she used that knowledge to strike at the heart of alien production. Her team destroyed the main computer center, shut down the power grid, and opened the slave quarters to release every human worker in the facility. The Zephyrians tried to call for help, but their communication systems had been sabotaged by humans who understood their technology better than they did. Dr. Alex Turner had provided detailed information about how to disrupt alien networks, and his intelligence proved invaluable. The insects found themselves cut off from their fleet and unable to coordinate a response to the human attacks. Captain Pete Johnson brought his asteroid base fleet out of hiding to join the battle for Earth. His ships were smaller than the regular human fleet, but they were faster and more maneuverable. Pete had trained his crews to fight like pirates, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the darkness of space. His vessels swarmed around the larger Kethvar ships like angry hornets, hitting them with weapons that the aliens had never seen before. The key to human success was the element of surprise, combined with superior intelligence about alien weaknesses. Dr. Maria Santos had provided detailed information about Zephyrian shield frequencies, and her data allowed human weapons to penetrate defenses that had seemed impenetrable for 3 years. The aliens discovered too late that their slaves had been studying them as carefully as scientists examining insects under a microscope. General Rodriguez coordinated the global assault from his command bunker, watching as reports poured in from battlefields across the planet. Human forces were winning everywhere they attacked because they understood their enemy better than the enemy understood itself. The Kethvar had expected to face primitive weapons and desperate tactics, but instead, they encountered advanced technology and brilliant strategy. The battle for the main Kethvar fortress in North America lasted only 6 hours. Ryan Brooks and his team fought their way through level after level of the alien stronghold, using knowledge gained from 3 years of forced labor to navigate the complex. They knew where the Kethvar kept their weapons, where their commanders lived, and which systems controlled the facility's defenses. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Jake Morrison's fleet destroyed the Kethvar orbital defense network in a series of coordinated attacks that left the alien ships burning in Earth's orbit. The New Horizon led the charge, its upgraded weapons tearing through alien hulls like paper. Human fighters swarmed around the larger enemy vessels, exploiting weak points that had been identified by slaves working in alien shipyards. The psychological impact of the human victory was as important as the military success. For 3 years, the Kethvar had believed themselves to be invincible conquerors who could crush any resistance. Now they watched their carefully planned occupation collapse in a single day as their former slaves systematically destroyed everything they had built. Lisa Ward captured the surviving Kethvar commander and broadcast his surrender to every human resistance cell in the galaxy. The image of the reptilian general kneeling before a human officer sent a powerful message to enslaved populations across dozens of worlds. If Earth could free itself, then freedom was possible everywhere. The Zephyrian fleet attempted to reinforce their ground forces, but they arrived too late. Pete Johnson's raiders had already destroyed most of the alien installations on Earth, and the planet's surface was controlled by human forces. The insect ships found themselves facing an upgraded human fleet that was ready for them. Alex Turner's Research paid off as human vessels used modified transmitters to overload Zephyrian shields, leaving their ships vulnerable to conventional weapons. Tony Clark led the final assault on the last Kethvar stronghold, a fortress built inside what used to be the Rocky Mountains. The aliens had retreated there with their remaining forces, hoping to make a final stand. But Tony's team included former slaves who had worked in that facility, and they knew exactly how to break through its defenses. The battle lasted 3 hours and ended with complete human victory. By dawn, Earth was free. The alien occupation force had been destroyed or captured, and their orbital infrastructure was in ruins. Human flags flew once again over the cities that had been slave camps just 24 hours earlier. But the victory on Earth was only the beginning of a much larger war. Reports came in from across the galaxy as other human resistance cells launched their own attacks. The uprising had spread to every world where humans were enslaved, and the aliens found themselves fighting a coordinated rebellion that stretched across hundreds of star systems. The species they had dismissed as primitive slaves had become a military force that threatened the very existence of their empire. General Rodriguez stood on the surface of Earth for the first time in 3 years and looked up at the sky that was no longer filled with alien ships. The air smelled of smoke and freedom, and he could hear the cheers of liberated humans echoing across the planet. But Rodriguez knew that this was not the end of the war. The Kethvar Dominion and Zephyrian Collective still controlled most of the galaxy, and they would not give up their empire without a fight. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the Kethvar homeworld burn. It had taken 2 years since the liberation of Earth, but humanity had finally reached the heart of the alien empire. The planet below was covered in cities that had stood for thousands of years, built with the labor of countless enslaved species. Now those same cities were crumbling under the assault of human warships that moved through space like harbingers of judgment. The human fleet had grown beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Every liberated world contributed ships, weapons, and warriors to the cause of freedom. The Free Worlds Alliance now included dozens of species that had suffered under Kethvar rule, all united by their hatred of their former oppressors and their respect for the humans who had shown them that resistance was possible. Captain Lisa Ward commanded the siege fleet that surrounded Kethvar Prime, cutting off all escape routes and supply lines. Her ships were no longer the desperate vessels built in hidden asteroid bases. These were purpose-built warships, designed by the best engineers from 20 different worlds. They combined human innovation with technologies stolen from across the galaxy, creating weapons of destruction that surpassed anything the Kethvar had ever imagined. The aliens had tried to negotiate before the final assault began. They sent ambassadors carrying white flags and promises of peace, begging the humans to show mercy. Jake Morrison listened to their pleas with the same cold attention that Kethvar commanders had once given to human suffering. The aliens spoke of making amends, of peaceful coexistence, of sharing the galaxy as equals. Jake's response was simple and final. There would be no mercy for those who had enslaved children and murdered innocents. The Kethvar had taught humanity what war truly meant, and now they would learn that lesson themselves. The only terms were complete and unconditional surrender, followed by trials for war crimes and the dismantling of their entire military machine. General Sam Rodriguez was on the surface of Kethvar Prime, leading the ground assault that would capture the alien government. His troops were no longer desperate resistance fighters hiding in tunnels. They were professional soldiers equipped with the finest weapons technology could provide. Many of them were former slaves who had volunteered for this mission specifically, because they wanted to see their former masters brought to justice. The Kethvar military tried to defend their home world, but they were fighting an enemy that understood them completely. 3 years of slavery had given humans detailed knowledge of alien psychology, tactics, and technology. Every defensive position was anticipated. Every counterattack was predicted and countered. The reptilian soldiers who had once seemed invincible now fled in terror from human forces that moved with mechanical precision. Dr. Ben Carter had established research stations throughout the former Kethvar territory, analyzing alien technology and incorporating the best elements into human designs. The humans were no longer just copying stolen technology, they were improving it. Carter's teams had developed new types of energy weapons, faster-than-light drives, and shield systems that made human ships superior to anything else in the galaxy. The Liberation Campaign had followed a careful pattern on every conquered world. Human forces would arrive and destroy the alien military installations while broadcasting messages of freedom to the enslaved populations. The former slaves were given weapons and invited to join the fight against their oppressors. Most accepted eagerly, swelling the ranks of the Free World's alliance with warriors who had personal reasons to hate the Kethvar. Commander Tony Clark was leading the assault on the Kethvar government complex, a massive fortress that housed the alien ruling council. Tony had once repaired vehicles for these same creatures, who now cowered behind energy barriers and automated defenses. He knew their weaknesses because he had seen them firsthand during years of forced labor. The aliens were bullies who were brave only when they held overwhelming advantages. The psychological warfare was as important as the military campaign. Every human victory was broadcast across the galaxy, showing enslaved populations that their masters were not invincible. The sight of Kethvar soldiers surrendering to former slaves shattered the aura of fear that had kept the alien empire together for centuries. Rebellions broke out on dozens of worlds as subject species realized that freedom was within their reach. Linda Hayes commanded the liberation of the Zephyrian factory worlds, where millions of humans and other species had been forced to build weapons for their oppressors. The insects had retreated to their core systems after losing most of their territory to the advancing human fleet. Linda's forces moved methodically from world to world, freeing slaves and destroying the industrial infrastructure that had powered the alien war machine. The Zephyrians proved to be more dangerous enemies than the Kethvar because they were smarter and more adaptable. Where the reptilians relied on brute force and intimidation, the insects used cunning and deception. They tried to slow the human advance by destroying their own facilities and killing slaves rather than let them be liberated. This only made the human forces more determined to hunt down every last member of their leadership. Dr. Maria Santos worked with liberated alien scientists to unlock the secrets of ancient technologies that the Kethvar had stolen from conquered species. The most important discovery came when they found records of the Veltar, an ancient race whose mathematical knowledge had been the foundation for much of the galaxy's advanced technology. The Veltar had been enslaved so long ago that everyone thought they were extinct. But Maria's research revealed that small populations of Veltar still survived in hidden colonies throughout the galaxy. These ancient beings possessed knowledge that even the Kethvar had never fully understood. When human forces liberated the first Veltar colony, the aliens shared their mathematical theories with their rescuers. The combination of Veltar knowledge and human engineering created weapons and ships that made the human fleet virtually unstoppable. Captain Pete Johnson had been promoted to admiral and now commanded the fast attack squadrons that hunted down fleeing alien ships. His vessels were built for speed and stealth, able to appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Pete's forces specialized in destroying alien supply lines and communication networks, leaving enemy fleets isolated and unable to coordinate their defenses. The Kethvar leadership finally realized that their empire was doomed when human forces captured their primary military academy. The facility contained detailed records of every alien military operation for the past 500 years, including complete lists of war crimes committed on conquered worlds. This intelligence allowed human prosecutors to build cases against thousands of alien officers who would face justice for their actions. Jake Morrison received the final surrender of the Kethvar ruling council in the same chamber where they had once planned the enslavement of humanity. The alien leaders knelt on the floor where their predecessors had celebrated countless victories over weaker species. Jake accepted their surrender with the quiet dignity of someone who had seen too much suffering to take pleasure in revenge. The trials began immediately. Human legal experts worked with representatives from dozens of liberated species to establish courts that would judge the alien war criminals according to the laws they had violated. The proceedings were broadcast throughout the galaxy so that everyone could see justice being done. Many of the alien defendants tried to claim they were only following orders, but this excuse was rejected by judges who had once been their slaves. General Rodriguez oversaw the dismantling of the Kethvar military machine. Every warship was either destroyed or converted to peaceful purposes. Weapons factories were torn down and their materials used to build schools and hospitals on liberated worlds. The alien soldiers who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were reduced to prisoners doing manual labor under the supervision of their former victims. The Zephyrian leadership made one final attempt to salvage their empire by retreating to the Galactic Rim and trying to rebuild their forces. They thought that distance would protect them from human vengeance, but they underestimated the reach of the Free Worlds Alliance. Admiral Johnson's fast attack squadrons pursued them across thousands of light years, systematically destroying every base and facility they tried to establish. Lisa Ward led the final assault on the last Zephyrian stronghold, a massive space station hidden in a nebula at the edge of known space. The insects had gathered their remaining forces there for a desperate last stand, hoping that their superior defensive position would allow them to negotiate from strength. Instead, they discovered that human technology had advanced to the point where their defenses were useless. The battle lasted only 3 hours. Human ships phased through the nebula using technology based on Veltar mathematics, appearing inside the Zephyrian defensive perimeter without warning. The alien station was destroyed along with the last remnants of the insect fleet. The Zephyrian collective ceased to exist as an organized force, reduced to scattered refugees hiding in the darkness between stars. Tony Clark was present when the last Kethvar Emperor was brought before the War Crimes Tribunal. 5 years had passed since the last Zephyrian stronghold fell, and the galaxy looked completely different. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the Grand Assembly Hall on Earth, watching as representatives from 300 worlds gathered to celebrate the anniversary of liberation. The species that had once cowered under alien oppression now stood proudly as equals in the Free Worlds Alliance, united by their shared commitment to freedom and justice. The transformation had been remarkable. Worlds that had been stripped bare by Kethvar mining operations were now green again, their ecosystems restored by terraforming technology developed by human scientists working with liberated alien researchers. Cities that had been destroyed during the war had been rebuilt better than before, incorporating architectural styles from dozens of different species into beautiful hybrid designs. Captain Lisa Ward now served as the Supreme Commander of Alliance Defense Forces, overseeing a fleet that spanned the entire galaxy. Her ships were no longer weapons of war, but guardians of peace, patrolling trade routes and protecting developing civilizations from pirates and raiders. The vessels themselves were works of art as much as military hardware, designed by engineers from multiple species working together. The former enemies had learned to respect the power of the Alliance through bitter experience. Scattered groups of Kethvar and Zephyrian survivors still existed in the outer regions of the galaxy, but they had been reduced to pirates and scavengers. Whenever they tried to establish bases or raid peaceful worlds, Alliance forces would appear swiftly to destroy them. The galaxy had learned that attacking human interests brought swift and overwhelming retaliation. General Sam Rodriguez had become the first director of the Alliance Council, a position that made him one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But Rodriguez wielded that power carefully, always remembering the lessons learned during the dark years of slavery. He established laws that protected the rights of all sentient species and created institutions that would prevent any one group from dominating the others. The war crimes trials had continued for 3 years after the liberation, processing thousands of cases against alien officers who had committed atrocities during their reign of terror. Many of the defendants were sentenced to life imprisonment, forced to spend their remaining years doing the same manual labor they had once inflicted on slaves. Others were executed for the most heinous crimes, their deaths broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to future tyrants. Dr. Ben Carter had established the Alliance Research Institute, bringing together the brightest minds from every member species to push the boundaries of science and technology. The Institute's facilities on dozens of worlds worked on projects that would have been impossible during the era of alien oppression. They developed new medicines, cleaner energy sources, and technologies that improved life for billions of beings. The most significant breakthrough came when Carter's teams successfully decoded the complete archives of the Veltar, the ancient, mathematical civilization that had been enslaved by the Kethvar centuries ago. The Veltar equations revealed principles of physics that had been hidden for generations, leading to advances in faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation, and even theoretical time research. Commander Tony Clark now served as the Alliance's Chief Industrial Coordinator, overseeing the conversion of former Kethvar weapons factories into facilities that produced goods for peaceful purposes. The same assembly lines that had once built instruments of oppression now manufactured medical equipment, agricultural machinery, and consumer products that improved life throughout the galaxy. Tony took special satisfaction in his work because he remembered what those factories had been like when he was a slave. The alien overseers who had once whipped human workers now found themselves answering to human managers who demanded efficiency and quality. The irony was not lost on anyone involved, and it served as a constant reminder of how completely the balance of power had shifted. Linda Hayes had become the Alliance's coordinator for refugee affairs, helping former slaves from dozens of species rebuild their lives and find new homes. Her department worked with planets throughout the galaxy to establish settlement programs for beings who had been displaced by centuries of alien oppression. The work was challenging but deeply rewarding, giving her the chance to heal some of the wounds left by the war. The economic transformation of the galaxy had been as dramatic as the political changes. Trade networks that had been controlled by alien empires were now managed by the Alliance Council, ensuring fair treatment for all member species. Worlds that had been stripped of their resources during the occupation were given priority access to reconstruction aid and investment opportunities. Dr. Maria Santos led the Alliance's cultural preservation program, working to restore the languages, arts, and traditions that alien oppressors had tried to destroy. Many species had lost significant portions of their cultural heritage during centuries of slavery, but Santos and her teams worked tirelessly to recover what could be saved and help communities rebuild what had been lost. The program had achieved remarkable success, reviving dozens of extinct languages and rediscovering artistic traditions that had been banned by alien rulers. Cultural festivals now took place regularly throughout Alliance space, celebrating the diversity that made the organization stronger than any empire that had come before it. Captain Pete Johnson commanded the Alliance's exploration fleets, pushing the boundaries of known space and making contact with civilizations that had been isolated during the era of alien empires. His ships carried diplomats and scientists rather than weapons, offering friendship and cooperation to newly discovered species rather than conquest and enslavement. The exploration program had already made contact with 17 new civilizations, all of which had been invited to join the Alliance as equal partners. Some had been primitive societies just beginning to develop technology, while others were advanced cultures that had hidden themselves to avoid alien attention. All were welcomed with the same respect and offered the same protections. The Alliance had also established strict protocols for first contact situations, ensuring that newly discovered species would never face the kind of exploitation that had once been common under alien rule. Human exploration teams were trained in diplomacy and cultural sensitivity, approaching each new civilization as potential friends rather than subjects to be conquered. Ambassador Kate Williams now served as the Alliance's chief diplomatic officer, managing relationships with the various groups that remained from the old alien empires. Her job was complicated because many former Kethvar and Zephyrian populations still existed on scattered worlds throughout the galaxy. Most had accepted the new order peacefully, but some continued to harbor resentments about their fallen empires. Kate's approach was to offer these groups a choice between integration and isolation. Those who were willing to renounce their past crimes and accept Alliance law were welcomed as new citizens with full rights and protections. Those who refused were allowed to establish isolated colonies on remote worlds where they could live according to their own traditions as long as they did not threaten others. The policy had been remarkably successful in preventing future conflicts. Most alien populations chose integration when they realized that the Alliance offered them better opportunities than they had ever enjoyed under their own empires. The few who chose isolation were carefully monitored but generally left alone as long as they remained peaceful. The anniversary celebration reached its climax when Jake Morrison addressed the assembled representatives from across the galaxy. He spoke about the journey that had brought them all together, from the dark days of alien oppression through the bloody years of liberation to the peaceful prosperity they now enjoyed. Morrison's speech was broadcast to every inhabited world, in Alliance space, reaching an audience of over 1 trillion sentient beings. He reminded them that freedom was not something to be taken for granted, and that vigilance was the price of maintaining the peace they had all worked so hard to achieve. The Admiral also announced new initiatives that would expand Alliance influence into previously unexplored regions of the galaxy. Massive colony ships were being prepared to establish human settlements in distant star systems, carrying with them the values and principles that had made the Alliance successful. These colonies would serve as beacons of freedom for any oppressed beings they might encounter. Rodriguez spoke next, outlining the Alliance's plans for the next decade. New research facilities would be built to study exotic phenomena like black holes and neutron stars. Trade agreements would be expanded to include recently contacted civilizations. Educational programs would be established to ensure that future generations understood the importance of the freedoms their ancestors had died to secure. The celebration concluded with a moment of silence for all those who had died during the long struggle for freedom. Humans and aliens stood together in the assembly hall, remembering the slaves who had perished in alien mines, the resistance fighters who had died in hopeless battles, and the soldiers who had given their lives to liberate oppressed worlds.